And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty, mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and the original mothership where 8 years, oh my God, of programming exists, and interviewing political candidates in 2016, talking about the Donald Trump in 2013. Who knew? We're like The Simpsons. Take a moment, if you will, folks, and follow us on social media. It is clearly the mother's milk, if you will, of independent media. Without that, it is difficult to rise above the noise. And I only need to point out at the reporting on today on the appointment for the Director of Homeland Security, one media broadcast is talking about it being, well, here we go. It's the Obama-Biden administration's continued authoritarian footprint on immigration. Then other people are saying he's great. How do you separate the noise? I don't know. But joining us tonight again is someone who has eclipsed repeat offender status. Hell, he's part of the family. We're going to zoom him into the Coalition Christmas party. And, of course, I'm talking about Conner Drigotas. ConnerDrigotas.com, ConnerDrigotas.com. Going to talk about a couple of things tonight, not the least of which is a book that you'll find linked on the homepage. And, of course, that's Work for Liberty, a book that I'm finding intriguing on multiple levels. I've read through it a couple of times, and it's just outstanding stuff. But whenever he comes on, we always go right into the news of the day. And you know, on one hand, I take this illness very seriously. I take COVID as a potential death threat to anyone. I've known, and yes, personally, I've known people of literally virtually every age group to be impacted, including some people in their 20s. I've seen people who are able to skip right through it, other people who did not have the benefit of a helicopter ride to a major medical facility with a state-of-the-art if you will, DNA replicating. By the way, did they really screw with Donald Trump's DNA or RNA? Scary thoughts, buddy. But, you know, I don't have the benefit of that. So I take it very seriously. At the same time, I'm going to refer to what I call stupid state government tricks as this week's kind of lead in, because, in fact, no less than the New York Times weighed in today about the notion that state governments across the country, despite their claims of following science, are just coming up with irrational, on-the-fly, make it up as you go along, pray like hell someone shows up solutions. I'm going to turn over the mic to Mr. Drigotas. I have a feeling he's got some pretty strong opinions on this. Do you, Conner?
I absolutely do. I think you know by now it takes me a little bit to get rattled, but I'll be honest. I was pretty upset today as I was looking at the double standard that exists in state houses across the country. To be honest, it was really triggered by something happened in my own backyard, where our governor in Pennsylvania, Governor Wolf, decided that from 5 p.m. the night before Thanksgiving to 8 a.m. on Thanksgiving Day, restaurants would be prohibited from selling any alcohol. Meanwhile, the state-run liquor stores are still going to be open for business just fine, which seems just like a terrible way to stick it to small businesses while padding the pockets of the government revenue. It's unacceptable, and quite frankly, I'm really upset.
Well, and here in Rhode Island, we've got the specter of the state-owned casino, and there's a casino monopoly. One corporation, if you will, manages both casinos. And in our state, essentially, the casinos are actually state-owned. And they're brought in to manage and get a piece of the pie, if you will, which is bizarre. Shocking, make sure no one's drinking any hot liquid out there right now. Those have been allowed to stay open. Conner, we've got a 2-week run-up to what's called, I don't even want to dignify what it's called, but we've got a 2-week run-up to a semi-shutdown. So it's really bad. So we're going to tell you in 14 days you're going to dial things back. In 13 days, and by the way, they're even discussing how they're going to handle big box stores on Good Friday, all because it's clear that they've just got to keep filling the coffers. Is it that simple, or what's going wrong here?
Well, what's going wrong is that businesses aren't being allowed the freedom to make this choice for themselves. So there's a really important concept that I personally believe in, which is brought forward by Michael Porter of Harvard Business School. And it's called creating shared value. It's this idea in business that you can do good and you can do well, right? Think of Domino's Pizza paving the roads. We all benefited from cleaner, smoother roads that we can drive on for our own cars, but Domino's made a ton of money off of their marketing, right? Similarly here, Target made the decision to shut down a lot of their Black Friday events. Target Corporation, the giant big box retail store, which may or may not have been the right thing to do, but they will either reap the benefits or suffer the consequences depending on that decision. Businesses inherently are going to be better than government at evaluating risk because they actually have some skin in the game. Governments, at the end of the day, are never letting a good crisis go to waste. And unfortunately, that's coming at our expenses, the expense of our liberty and our dollars. It's insane.
So what it's my contention that government bears a significant responsibility, not for the creation of the crisis. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, or as my friends now call themselves, conspiracy realists. I'm not a believer in that. What I am a believer, though, is that the ham-handed approach of government in every single aspect, in the run-up, if you will, to the overt regulation of our healthcare industry and the inability as a result of the healthcare industry to react in a nimble, fast reaction crisis mode, it combined that with all sorts of government tie-ins in terms of corporate cronyism to these vast private-public partnerships that exist around the country, and I'm talking about casinos and stadiums and this and that. Add in the high cost of running a small business because of overregulation of insurance, not just health insurance, but all the other type forms of insurance that are a daily part of business's life these days. When you mix this whole fitted stew together, what you've done is you've handicapped an economy and/or the individual's, if you will, expertise in order to react quickly, and to already, by the way, in top of that, have in place capacity, which is privately funded, in order to support the crisis as it happens. Throw in the mix of businesses who were already on the verge of a nervous breakdown, even running into the COVID era, before the COVID era, with the high costs and difficult economic landscape. All of this has created a situation where government is not our friend. Government is the single largest ingredient in the failed reaction of America in general, these United States of America, to react to this. Am I overstating it, do you think?
It's so hard to tell. I always wonder about what this is going to look like in the history books, whether this is going to be a sentence, a paragraph, or maybe 2020 gets its own chapter. But when you look at it, one of the biggest red flags for me about whether or not government has overstepped its bounds is how government is treating itself. And I dropped the phrase before, double standard. And I think that's probably what's most troubling to me out of this entire situation. You look at Governor Newsom out of California, who, despite telling people they couldn't see their grandparents for Thanksgiving, limiting gatherings to no more than 3 households, went out to a very lavish birthday party at a very fancy restaurant with him and 50 of his closest best friends for someone's birthday and his administration. Or Nancy Pelosi, who still planned to run out these massive dinners to welcome new members of Congress. If I'm being told I can't see my grandparents, who are incredibly important people in my life, you better make damn sure it's for a good reason. And you also better make sure that those standards are applied equally. I'm not sure I agree with any of the lockdowns at all. I believe that people should be free to make those decisions for themselves. But as long as we're in this reality right now, in order to even put up the facade of legitimacy, it would be nice if government officials played along.
In other words, you're sensing a do as I say, not as I...
It is. I feel like what's the phrase from Animal Farm, right? The whole idea of all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. I kind of feel like, if you remember the famous scene from the novel where the animals are standing looking in to the house where the pigs are now walking on their hind legs and behaving as the very thing they swore to destroy. When you talk about the role of government in our lives, I don't think any reasonable person could look at this situation and say that these kind of politicians are acting in our best interest, or that they're acting at the very least in a manner consistent with practicing what they preach.
I've long held that, particularly on the federal level, but particularly at what I'll call the higher employment level, the more highly compensated employment level in state and municipal governments, that in fact, members of that rarefied air, and I'm talking about the project managers. I'm not talking about the people who, fold the laundry at state hospitals, or who literally dig the dishes. There's always dignity in hard work at any level. But the folks who are, making the six-figure salaries while getting the Cadillac healthcare plan, while at the same time still retaining some of the vestiges of a defined benefit plan, all of those people have become the true 1% in this country, because there is no risk. There is no risk element to their lives. They do not need to employ risk capital in order to, say, create a business or maintain a business in a world where disruption seems to take place every few hours. They are protected, if you will, from the exigencies of a COVID crisis. They are not being laid off. They are being furloughed only to receive their money back at some later time, if in fact that's even happening. So all that's missing at this point between, as I like to say, Soviet worker paradise and, if you will, the upper levels of state and federal government, is the dollar stores, that were the hallmark of the Brezhnev era, where you actually got paid in dollars and you could go to the dollar stores and buy goods and services, while the rest of societies were virtually at the windshield, or at the window, if you will, doing blowing on the window so that they could see in and at least see what the other half looked like, or, as you pointed out so aptly, see that some, in fact, were more equal to others. Is that an overreaction?
The only thing I think I disagree with in that statement is you said that furloughed workers get their money back. That's our money coming out of our pockets to pay those salaries. But it's true. And there's so many things that are parallel between these different times, right? The old move from the Soviet Union playbook, right? The Ghost Plan, the central committee that tried to supervise and regulate this planned economy of the USSR to disastrous ends. We're seeing the same thing now with Joe Biden coming up with something like his supply commander that would oversee the national supply of these goods, right? We're heading in a direction that in many ways we have been warned against so many times, from Washington and Madison and even Hamilton, in some cases, speaking out against partisanship and factions and parties, all the way through Tocqueville talking about the importance of how America could collapse in on itself. We're seeing these really important lessons get ignored in the name of these short-term gains. I started reading Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt recently. And for some reason, it's one that's not crossed my desk recently. And I got to say, there's a lot of pieces in here as well that just make me think this is fixable. I'm the optimist, but it's really going to take some creative thinking from some really selfless people to make it happen.
One of the figures that comes to mind for me in a situation like this, and in fact, let's create a bet or a contest between you and I. Who is the character in the Biden administration that most rivals the infamous Wesley Mooch from Atlas Shrugged? All right, as one tome puts it, the incompetent and treacherous lobbyist who Hank Rearden reluctantly employs in Washington, and ultimately, and I love this term, the equalization of opportunity bill. When can we expect to see our first equalization of opportunity bill? Which, I'm stealing this from an online site, by restricting the number of businesses each person may own to one, forces one of the prognosticators to divest most of their companies, and thereby create fairness. By the way, Connor, for the record, I don't know if we've discussed this before, but I consider the most lethal, ugly four-letter word in the language fair.
We have not talked about that before. No, but you're onto something there, because people misunderstand that word, right? They think that fair means that it's the idea of a rising tide carries all ships, right? Except they think that equality is always going to scale us up, and we're going to live in some sort of utopia. What history's shown us is that there are a lot of factors that go into creating a better world, and almost every single one of them involves the free market. It involves people getting together and creating things because they want to, not because they have a gun to their head being forced to. The world's greatest problems can be solved in that way, right? Going back to the creating shared value piece, the idea of doing good and doing well are somehow broken up in this discussion of modern day capitalism, when in reality, the real win of capitalism is saying, hey, you have something that's a value to me. I have something that's a value to you. Let's get together and make something great. That's still possible. And I think that's what we need to be working toward if this whole thing is going to work out.
Well, and at what point do Americans, is this the crisis? And I'll play optimist in a sense, in a very dark way. Is this the crisis that if in fact the liberty movement, this we're going to ask you about your communication skills, how do we communicate this, where we finally see that government cannot protect us, government cannot save us, government will actually be a barrier to solutions, and understand that it is fundamental ingenuity of the individual in working alongside and working cooperatively with other individuals that is ultimately the savior to this country. Is this the crisis that may do that?
I wish I was as optimistic. This is a weird role reversal. Normally I'm Mr. Optimistic, but I find myself on the other end. And the first thing that I think of is the Tea Party movement. Mm-hmm. This organization of people that, as I look at it right now, may have been ahead of their time when that group was so active and they were enacting change. They didn't really get as far as they could have. And in fact, as the movement petered out, they ended up in many ways consolidating their support from Tea Party groups that I've spoken to behind President Trump. And that was a tactical error if their goal was in fact more liberty, because it gave the Republican Party a cover to do so many things that are exactly in the wrong direction. I give credit where credit's due. Donald Trump has done a number of amazing things for this country, but he's far from perfect. And the result of his outlandish anger and constantly churning up his base is that we ended up with a Joe Biden at the end of it. And the danger there is far beyond anything that the Tea Party would want to see in reality.
I mean, is that ultimately the fate of most movements? I mean, in this case, the Tea Party first, they were first hijacked, if you will, by social conservatives who tried to weave economic freedom in small government into, quite frankly, if you're a social conservative, you believe in large government. It's just a question of whether religion has taken the place of government for you. Is that the fate of these organizations, become co-opted at a certain point? How do you maintain both purity and strength? I mean, one could argue that the Libertarian Party is incredibly pure about their philosophy, about their statement of principles, about their platform. Yet, despite years of effort by people like myself, has yet to gain that kind of traction that the Tea Party did. How does that work?
Yeah. There's something, a concept that I would prefer there, which is the concept of the first follower. So there's many interesting studies about human behavior showing that it does take someone unique or a group of people, a spearhead, to create a movement. But what really defines whether or not a movement is going to be successful is their first follower. Are they getting someone who's bought in, that's moving their mission in the same direction, or is it going to push it in a different direction? And I do believe in the power of successful movements, because we see successful movements all the time. Sure, they come in ebbs and flows, but even then, if they've served their purpose, I wouldn't say that co-opted or failed is an accurate way to describe those movements. Once things get going, and I believe liberty, independent of any party, is a winning concept. If we can get those followers along in our individual movements, these tiny ripples that we're making, whether it's criminal justice reform, marijuana legalization, right to try, all of these different libertarian ideas, anti-war being a big one right now in this moment, if we're creating those little ripples, those are going to grow together to a wave. We need to find first followers who are going to be allies in our lives, allies in our mission, not just people who take part of what we're going for and try to twist it for their own purposes. We need to be good teachers and good ambassadors in our communities.
And inadvertently, I think you've given us a good setup for the next time we get together, which is discuss which of those issues, whether it be immigration and immigration justice, whether it be the wars, the endless series of wars, whether it be economic independence, what are those issues, if you will? I'll just put this out for fodder because we've only got a couple minutes. I want to touch on every time you come on your book, Work for Liberty. Which of those issues, if any one issue, is the one that we place our hopes on and really rally behind? Because it would appear that the liberty movement, including the Libertarian Party, is hopelessly diffused over a range of issues, and the spectrum of opinions about those issues within the movement itself. Is it time to focus on one issue and just work that? I'm not sure, and that's what I'd love to think about for the next time we get together. But I would be remiss if we didn't spend at least a couple minutes that you've got left talking about Work for Liberty. So let me throw out a proposition, if you want. Of course, this is the book by Conner Drigotas. We've got it linked on the Coalition Radio Network.com homepage. You can buy directly from Amazon, and it will be on your home in just a few days, as it was mine. Fascinating study, a real how-to to folks looking to get involved in the liberty movement. Well, that's superficially the first point of the book. But a second point of the book, and we talked last week about the Discord server and the chats and the if you will, the fact that this book has brought together so many people already of a variety of backgrounds and educations and career choices. It's created, in a sense, the beginning of a process of, and not to be too touchy-feely here, because Conner knows I'm not, but a little bit of a self-revelatory process here, that where one not only goes through the motions, if you will, resume, interviews, who to pursue, which websites to go to, but it also involves the creation of a process where you really analyze exactly what it is you want to do within the liberty movement and how you can find employment in it. So I want to posture to you, if you will, a scenario that's actually more common than most people might think. As they always say, speaking for a friend, if you find yourself in your 50s or early 60s and you've been drawn to this movement through either a lifelong set of activities and hyperactivism, or maybe you're relatively new to it and you want to get involved. At the same time, the type of career opportunities that exist now, because of K Street, because of the legislation that's created PACs and super PACs, there are all sorts of job opportunities, if you will, for young people graduating from college with a government degree, or particularly if they've taken the next step and gotten a legal degree. And there's all sorts of entry-level opportunities with groups all over D.C., New York, and to a certain degree across the country. You mentioned in the book the Goldwater Institute, an organization that's been on this show many times. Wonderful, wonderful organizations. What are some tips for folks who might be a little bit older? What would you pursue, or what opportunities would you try and find? I mean, give us a little insight into that, if you would.
For sure. It's such an important topic, right? I think that there is a time in everyone's life when they realize that they want to be fighting for their principles, right? And I'm a big advocate. If you're going to spend 40 years working, you should be doing it for something that you care about. And if you do find yourself further down your career line and you haven't quite found that home and you realize it might be in liberty, the number one thing I would do is make sure that you have a good catalog of what are your skills right now. If you were to create a company using those skills, what would it be? Have you been managing a team? Have you been designing various computer programs? Have you been working in finance? Have you been working in the trades, building physical systems that we need to survive? All of these aspects are directly applicable to jobs that are needed in the liberty movement. Right now, there are organizations who are building the physical buildings that they will headquarter their liberty organizations in. I believe the Heritage Foundation is expanding right now in DC physically. Today, I posted 15 new jobs in the Work for Liberty Discord server, and those included everything from tech, IT administrators to entry-level development, fundraising people, to just folks with human resources experience. So anyone who has ever managed a team, hired or fired, or led individuals, there are opportunities just in skills that cross industries. The one thing that I would say you shouldn't think is I have nothing to bring to the table, because one of the most important qualifying skills in a growing liberty movement is a true pride and principled stance about liberty. That'll take you a long way. If you're coming to our community or another community with that, we can put the tools in your hand through internships, externships, education to get you where you want to be.
No, that's fabulous. And again, the communal nature, if you will, if I can use the term communal nature in a conversation about the getting hired in the liberty movement, you may want to just rethink that statement if you're going on a job interview. But it's very important because, folks talk about the Liberty fam. There really is an extended family of that's, I wouldn't say finite, but it's a much smaller world than you'd think. And if you've already been involved as an activist, if you've already been involved at some level, you've already kind of created a footprint for yourself. There's a record that you have to work on. And I think that's very important to consider if, in fact, there's a later in life decision to pursue this. Because on top of that, it strikes me what this movement needs is I wouldn't say emotional maturity. I don't want to go complete snowflake on you, but at the same time, there is a little bit of a need for wisdom and perspective, because we have to dig ourselves out of one hell of a hole in this country. And I don't think I'm being pessimistic by saying this is not going to be an overnight process. I don't think I'm being cynical by saying that what's the old cliche? It's a marathon, not a sprint. Is that a fairly apt way to describe it?
This process, in terms of moving toward liberty as a country, is really going to be, we get out what we put into it. And I mean that both on an individual level and a systemic level. Yes, of course, it's going to take time for these ideas to become popular with just the general population, mostly because we need to do a better job explaining it. The ideas themselves of liberty are universally well liked. That's the parlance of Republicans and Democrats right now, is how do we sound most liberty friendly, most true to our principles, while violating them on the back end. It's a very frustrating position to be in because you see that people are so close. What I would say is that it's about finding these people and building these coalitions, these networks, because again, yes, individualism is wonderful. And one of the strengths of individualism isn't being a loner. It's about finding those people who you want to work with and realizing that you can engage in that voluntary exchange to build something that is truly valuable for not just you, but do good while doing well. And that is going to compound over the course of time.
Excellent stuff. What have you, in closing tonight, what are you working on these days? I know you said you were working on an article. When can we see the next, if you will, vision from Conner Drigotas?
You should have a new op-ed coming out in the next couple of days talking about lockdowns. Obviously, as I mentioned before, based on some frustrations in my own state. And now that the book is done and I'm spending a tremendous amount of time working on building this community, you can expect to see a lot more relevant op-ed pieces as I'm back in the swing of things, paying attention to what's going on in the world while building this community and making sure that liberty is thriving.
Excellent. Conner Drigotas of ConnerDrigotas.com, ConnerDrigotas. You can find a link to his book, Work for Liberty. Let me make sure I get that right in the camera. Right on the top of CoalitionRadioNetwork.com. It is available on Amazon, where you can have it in just a handful of days, and then sign up. How do folks sign up on the Discord servers? How does that work?
Yeah, so you could go to ConnerDrigotas.com/work. and fill out the form there, and it'll automatically email you an invite. Or you can visit us on my Twitter, the Work for Liberty Facebook, Parler, Float, Gab, Minds, anywhere. If you search Work for Liberty, you should be finding me and the book on social media. There are Discord links all over the internet. Please come join us. We'd love to have you. We cracked 200 people in the Discord today, so hoping to see that number continue to grow.
Right. Whether you be somewhat young, maybe just out of school, maybe just out of grad school or law school, looking to pursue a career in liberty, or if you're a little bit older and maybe you're recognizing that this is something that you want to make part of your daily life, not just a volunteer opportunity, but you see yourself carrying a passion for liberty in a way that so many people I know do within the Libertarian Party and folks that I've met. This is possibly one of the best investments you'll ever make. And anyone who knows me say I don't usually deal in that form of rhetoric. So it's just that good. So, Conner, again, thank you so very much for joining us. It's great having you on a few times a month. I hope you can continue to squeeze some time out for us. I know you play with some of the big boys, with some of the big DC papers and all that. Remember us here in the trenches of liberty, if you will, when I finally see you on Bill Maher or one of those shows. In fact, I think we need to start.
Happy to be here.
We need to start a petition. We need to get you on Bill Maher's show. I feel like you're the one person who can do the takedown that he, let's just say, he needs.
That is one of the nicest things anyone's ever said to me. Thank you, Pat. I appreciate it.
All right. I hope we would get a chance to talk to you again in the next week or so. Conner Drigotas. Folks, we're going to sign off for tonight. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network. Well, at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at coalition_radio, and of course the original mothership, coalitionradio.us, where I unearthed an interview with Gary Johnson from 2016. I unearthed an interview with the head of the Rhode Island ACLU, who talks about the history of the ACLU. There's awfully good stuff there if you're willing to spend a little bit of time. Most importantly, you're willing to separate yourself from, if you will, the Me Too mainstream media who reports on other people's reports, who ultimately base their reporting on a press report. Folks, have a great night. We'll see you soon.